My role is sort of to be the minder to get all these great speakers up here quickly. Lots of interesting issues. We're writing about this at the Wall Street Journal a lot, so is everybody else. How is education transforming? I'm talking to you, I work for a newspaper. Listen to the word, newspaper. Remember what those were? So the disruption that we've experienced in the news business, it seems eerily familiar to what you guys are dealing with too. We are, the same discussions about what we considered to be traditional have been blown to bits. And yet the fundamentals remain. You know, news is news, and that's, and probably, judging by all the complications that you guys are outlining here, some of this is going to be news because some of it's not going to work too well at first, and then people like me will be writing about it. And that's sort of, so keep that in mind and be kind when we call. But yeah, I mean, these are very complicated things, and students have expectations that are dramatically shifting. Teachers have professors have expectations that have been long-standing that are now going to be upended. Money. I work for the Wall Street Journal. Money is going to be a big factor in all of this. So, and so let's get right to it. I don't know how you want the people to come up, but let's just start with Van Davis.
All right. Good morning. My name is Dr. Van Davis. I am the Director of Innovations in Higher Education at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And I am here to talk to you today about innovation and accreditation, and more specifically about trying to fit round pegs into square holes, or square pegs into round holes. Paul LeBlanc, many of you are familiar with, has said accreditation has to rethink its relationship with innovation. I would say that one of the things that we need to do as innovators is rethink our relationship with accreditation. A lot of us feel like this. Even on the best days when we talk to staff and faculty, accreditation makes us go like this. But we're all flustered. We're all trying to figure out what to do in a very rapidly changing world. To give you an idea of how rapidly that is changing, 3 of our regional accreditors right now have policies in place for competency-based and direct assessment. Only 2 of them have actually approved programs, and our own regional accreditor, Sachs, is bringing one policy together forward in December. They're very different policies in some ways, but they share key ideas in common. They're concerned about how we define a competency. They're concerned about what is the role of faculty, and they're concerned about semester credit hour. Let's start with the first one, competency and direct assessment. The key problem here is that there are no common definitions. Everyone defines it differently, including the Department of Ed. And so one of the things that I think all of the regionals are trying to figure out is, and boy, this is going much faster than it was supposed to go. One of the things that I think all of the regionals are trying to figure out in all of this is how one defines a competency, and especially how one is trying to figure out the direct assessment piece. The other thing that everyone is trying to figure out is what is the role of faculty. In a traditional environment, we know what faculty do. We can see it, we can point to it, we can touch it, we can feel it. In a disaggregated model, it's not so easy to see. We need to point that out. We need to take the initiative of explaining our instructional models. We also have to figure out how to deal with the coin of the realm, semester credit hours. This is an example of what Northern Arizona is looking at in terms of a competency-based transcript. This don't look like what we're used to. And so we've got to figure out how we take this old, kind of rusted model of semester credit hours and make it fit for these very different models that we're talking about today. And that's not easy to do. All of us, I think, many times feel like we're walking through a minefield. And I don't think it's just the innovators that feel that way. I think it's the accreditors that feel that way and the policymakers that feel that way as well. We're trying to figure out where are the danger points because we don't want to step on them. Money is one of them. We know that accreditation is tied to state and federal financial aid. It is absolutely crucial that we figure out how to deal with the issue of accreditation so that our students aren't harmed, so that if we're going to have affordability, we truly have it. We also want to make sure that we don't become the next Chronicle of Higher Ed story on things gone bad, where we see Altius and Ivy Bridge and Tiffin that thought they had it worked out, and a year later, nah, they didn't have it worked out. The reality is, Bob Dylan, times are changing. And so how do we deal with those changing times? there's some political factors and external forces that we're having to face that we haven't really had to face to this extent in the past. One of those is that we have a sitting president that actually talked about accreditation in his State of the Union documents. That hasn't happened before. And we also know that we're coming up with the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. And that means there's going to be a national platform. Largely what they're going to be talking about in that national platform is what type of accreditation. Is it course-based? Is it program-based? Does it remain institutional? These are very different ideas than what we've really been dealing with in the past. And so the sands really are shifting underneath our feet. And it's not just shifting for us as innovators. It's shifting for policymakers. It's shifting for the accreditors. It's shifting for our students. And that has some very real repercussions. We have great opportunities, but we're going to have to really do a good job of communicating. And that's not just communicating with each other as innovators, which we're doing today, but it means communicating with our accreditors, communicating with policymakers so that we can bring them along with us. Because we know that change is happening. We know that we are going somewhere. We know that things aren't going to be the same, but we've got to figure out how to get there. We all want the same thing. We want quality education for our students. We want improved access. We want affordability. So we have to figure out how to get there together collectively. And I have to say, this is the shortest amount of time I have ever spoken in my life.
What's in your toolbox? What technologies are in the toolbox at your institution right now? There was a DE task force in October 2012 that was formed that basically focused on a lot of different things, but came up with 3 major areas that they lifted up and they thought were important. The second one here is the most important one that we came up with, we thought was important to this group and to everybody, which had to do with removing barriers to online educational opportunities for students in Georgia. That's what we're here, that's what we're about today. So after the task force identified these 3 particular areas, they came up with 10 key recommendations. And this is the one recommendation that I think is most important to the group that we're having and we're talking about today. That one recommendation was that all of our 31 institutions need to have a core set of technologies, a base set of technologies so that you all can be successful in the online environment. So what do those technologies need to be, and who need to determine what those technologies were? Well, there's a group already in existence, the Regents Advisory Committee on Distance Education. That's a group of 31 folks who meet twice a year. These are folks who have experience in distance education, have experience in technology, and we felt, and the DE Task Force recommended, this was the group that could come up with the set of tools or the list of what those technologies ought to be. So this group got together. What should those tools be? I know we're using that analogy a lot. What do you need? What do you need on your campuses to be successful in the online environment? So in our last meeting that we had, which was in September, we came up with a list of 10 categories. And those 10 we're not listing particular pieces of software in those categories, but the categories that you needed to have, and these are ranked in priority order. The first one was ADA compliance. Compliance is something we know we all have to do, we all should do. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about software that will go through and analyze how compliant the courses we design are, where they're weak, and where they may need more, something to be built up to make them more accessible. Virtual meeting software, we talked about that. All of you need a virtual meeting software of some type. Readiness assessment, what does this mean? This is a readiness assessment for your students to determine how ready your students are to go into the online environment. And if they're weak in particular areas, they can go get help in those areas before they go into the course to make sure they are successful when they go into the online environment, whether it's time management, or it's knowing how to attach an email to a file, anything like that. It's a readiness assessment. Virtual proctoring is something that's becoming more. If you're in an online environment and you're a student, you go, why do I have to show up anywhere to do anything? Virtual proctoring, whether it's webcam, and I think Tim talked about that, or someone talked about that kind of attitude. We're going toward that. We need to work that way. Anti-plagiarism, we're all familiar with what that is. I also felt storage and lecture capture was important. Analytics is a term we've heard a lot about over the past 12, 14, 18 months. Analytics in the sense of an instructor being able to determine what's going on in their course, what students are doing well, what students need help. Predictive analytics is what's going to be important for us. Predictive analytics for courses, predictive analytics for programs. Tutoring services, you've heard about, I'll go over to you, embedded reporters. We're talking about embedded tutors. If you are not familiar with that term, tutors in the course, not just software, but students, teaching assistants, or someone embedded in the course to spot where there's trouble and help students out as soon as they can. The idea is to get students help not the 4th week into the semester when they show poor writing skills, but get them help the 4th day into the course when they have poor writing skills. Course evaluations, and the 10th one was assessment builder. It would be nice in some cases if you could build your assessments outside the LMS and then import them in. These are the 10 areas you guys, all of us need to have. These are the ones that are important. So, there's your online student. Do you have those 10 technologies to help that student be successful? And now, if you don't, I would challenge you, how are you going to get there? How will you get those 10 technologies to your institution, to your faculty, so that you can be successful in helping those students stay in school and get their degree? Thank you.
As the communication person, I feel like I'm having an exam. My co-PI, Rebecca and Burnett, and I would like to thank the Gates Foundation for sponsoring our program. I've been asked to ignite your thinking about designing MOOC assessments, something I had experience with while teaching one of the first completely open MOOCs in writing. And with everything regarding MOOCs, expectations for assessments are developing rapidly. The earliest MOOCs didn't require any assessment because they were free and they carried no credit. However, as we move toward accrediting MOOCs, we must consider whether we are moving too fast and whether traditional assessment models continue to meet our needs. For Composition 2.0, we had a team of 19 people working to design and deliver every aspect of our course. Because it was a writing course, we faced serious challenges regarding how we could provide meaningful assessment to our students. Our goals for the course were to help students develop a better process and gain confidence in written, visual, and oral communication, and to create and critique college-level documents and presentations. Because there was, quite simply, no way to grade tens of thousands of written, visual, and oral projects, we chose to explore the possibilities of guided peer review. We wanted to help facilitate a community of learners who could help each other. We had mixed results. Questions about designing assessments for new delivery modes are not new. As Tom Reeves argued in 2006, regardless of the type of delivery system, assessment strategies must be carefully aligned with other components of the learning environment and with inherent technological affordances. When we think about traditional assessment, we know that quizzes and exams are the easiest to grade, but often not the best measure of a student's knowledge. More substantive forms of assessment provide a clearer sense of what a student has learned, but usually require expert feedback. MOOC assessments commonly employ machine-graded evaluation. We discovered that students could answer, "I trout," and be correct. Such grading is only as good as its algorithm. Peer review requires extensive training and oversight. As for proctored exams, there were issues with validation. MOOCs may bring education to the world, but cultural pressures to succeed create scenarios in which cheating is already an acknowledged problem. A 2012 study of retracted science papers revealed that India and China accounted for the most retractions due to plagiarism or duplication. And what of identity fraud? Can we be certain that the student taking the proctored exam is really the student enrolled in our course? Many MOOC users already prefer to conceal their identities for a variety of reasons. With every new technology, there is someone designing a way to subvert that technology. Another important consideration in designing assessments is providing for students with disabilities. Accessibility to materials and allowances for accommodations was a problem in our MOOC. We couldn't provide workable options for all of our students. All of these design questions relate to a bigger question. Does the platform support our pedagogical aims, or must we, as instructors and designers, adapt our aims to the platform? In the case of our MOOC, we found we had to sacrifice more than we wanted. There are certain pedagogical restrictions we must acknowledge. Mechanisms for machine grading and peer review remain limited. We must also address issues of embedded evaluation that often fail when students must work offline. Student privacy and security are magnified in the online setting. Beyond general privacy concerns, there are real and very serious cultural and political risks for some of our students. As we begin to seek accreditation, we will also be subject to FERPA or something similar. I have no idea how we're going to address these issues, but I know we must. Likewise, there are risks for instructors who may be inclined to design easier assessments because situations with grade disputes and harassment are exponentially greater in a MOOC. And what of performance reviews? What happens if not enough or too many of our students pass the course? Students may need alternate methods to complete assignments. How do we account for issues of access and connection in timed assessments, for example? There is also a myriad of multicultural considerations. Some of you may actually remember the famous SAT 1 question about oarsmen and regatta. That was an analogy that not everyone could understand. So where are we now? The American Council on Education has recommended that some courses be offered for credit, providing that a final exam be proctored and the identities of those test takers be authenticated. But let's put that into context. In Composition 2.0, we have MOOCs where we must look at the numbers, the very large numbers. If we shifted our evaluations to proctored situations, is there a viable plan for facilitating this? Can the existing structures support these kinds of numbers? Ultimately, there remain many questions without ready answers. We need to commit to a thorough and deliberate process to adapt our assessments. We need to consult with colleagues with strong backgrounds in distance and e-learning. We must be willing to lose sight of the shore for a very long time. My comments today are limited to a single experience with a single platform provider, and while there certainly are generalizable takeaways, mine was an experience, not the experience. Still, I'm happy to answer questions where I can. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. I'm Elke Leeds, and I'm here to talk about our implementation strategies at Kennesaw State. And we're here because we're part of the Curious, I think, that Houston mentioned. And we've looked at this as really defining our value proposition and asking why. And the why has to be asked from our faculty, because these are truly the champions of these initiatives. And it's conversation after conversation, volunteerism at its purest form, with innovation and transparency, because we are asking our colleagues to put content into the public domain. Well, we explore the environment, and we're using MOOC as a synonym for change, not as meaning any one thing. It can be social justice, opportunity, outreach, and access. We start by looking at what it has been. A year ago, this was just a platform, new technology. We look at what it still is, more questions than answers, and ways to really foster that discussion. We look at what it can be. It can be transformational, can be. When we look at access and flexibility and distributed education that becomes more affordable. More importantly, we drop the mantra of the old Wendy's commercial of "Where's my MOOC?" If we're not in this and in it for the right reasons, to offer opportunity and strengthen brands and increase engagement, a lot of times the conversation stops there. And I've just gotten better at the beginning part of that conversation. We have to look at the value proposition, if and only if. What do we want to accomplish? Who do we want to be? How are we going to measure success? What will students gain? What will the university gain? Why an open course? Why us? And why now? And especially why us? We've got a lot going on right now. Part of this is who we are and who we aren't. We are not an Ivy. We are a state and a comprehensive institution. We don't want to do this because everybody else is doing it. We want to look at what's already being offered, who's doing it, and what the quality is, because we have to differentiate. We do many things well, and those are the things we want to focus on, our strategic opportunities and our niche markets. Can we compete? Can we complete what's not already there? Can we find the gap and swim apart? Well, when we see that, we can really leverage the value. We can look at multiple audiences and open educational resources, digital in nature. We can really look at how to expand community involvement, make higher education relevant in the mind of the citizenry. At Kennesaw State, we're focusing on OOCs, not MOOCs, and certainly not KOOCs. We're looking at centers of excellence. What do we already do well and how can we expand upon that? Our champions are the faculty in the department willing to step up and be part of this. We're starting with a post-baccalaureate focus. It's centered, and it allows those faculty champions to step up. We're looking at enrollment drivers, pathways to credit, and some of our existing programs. We're also looking at transfer credits, alignment with strategic plan, Complete College Georgia, growth initiatives, and part of our Engage KSU, which is our mission. Each of these initiatives is looking at 3 levels of participation, each equally as important as the next. Beginning with the community, open and available, letting people have that 1 or 2 lecture experience, letting them learn who we are. We're looking at professionals and credentialing. Our first open course in January had a partnership with the Georgia Department of Education for professional learning units. I'm going back for a second. And for our current and future students, prior learning pathways. Can we direct them to the path to convert what they're learning in an open course to a certificate or a degree program? We already do a lot of it, and it's sending a clear message, packaging it in a way that students can follow and understand. CLEP, AP, now prior learning credit, portfolio review and assessment. Virtual assessment centers designed to make that easy to do business with, to invite people into who we are and what we do. And we're leveraging a new concept. MOOC is a synonym for change, not as a one concept fits everything. This doesn't have to be 10,000 students. Could be, that'd be great. But once we have agreement that faculty champion, it's the plan in place. It's design build, it's charting production, releases, MOUs, looking at who our existing partners are and how they'd like to be part of this experience with us. We're generating excitement and looking further down the pipeline for new opportunities. We begin in January with a K-12 blended and online learning open course at MOOC.Kennesaw. We're going from there into other concepts, and the faculty are lining up. We're having these conversations. The best way to start this is really with faculty at the center of the initiative. Thank you.
I'm not a business person or a finance person, so that gives me an excuse to say all kinds of wild and crazy things, I hope. That maybe gets you to think about some of the questions about business and business models in this world that we're operating in. And so I asked the first question about, does such a thing even exist? And I think the answer is no. We're figuring it out. We're figuring it out in real time. But the one thing I want to say is, if I can change this, is that we probably don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but maybe we want to throw all of them out. And the water, the babies, the bowls, and everything, to get outside of the box and think about the business of education, not in our current form, not the way we've thought about it for years, but in some new ways. And so the key is go the wrong way. The key is value. What we've got to do is we've got to erect a value proposition that creates an environment where students, stakeholders, parents, faculty, administrators see value in what is being done in the educational world we're facing today, not what we faced in the past. And so the key word up there is willingness to pay. And we hear about that a lot. Our friends in the media talk about that quite a bit, about the repercussions of increasing tuition costs without a perceived increase in value. So it's just an increased price, but without an increased association with value. One of the things we might want to rethink about, did I do that right? I didn't do that right. I'll get it, by the end I'll have this figured out, is bling. Bling isn't value. All right, so having a PhD program that graduates PhD students that can't get jobs is not something I would brag about. Having a football team or an athletic program that drains resources from the educational mission of the university because we believe maybe some donors will be attracted to it, or maybe it'll help in recruitment but not necessarily in retention, may be something we want to think about. How about a research program that produces questionable results? Many of them are out there. None of them, by the way, in the university system, but some of these other states have research programs that are just because we think we need to do it, because we think we're going to generate a lot of revenue from research programs. the majority of research programs are a negative impact on revenues at a university and not a positive impact. So the current business models can't be sustained, notwithstanding what people a lot of think. So if we count butts and seats for hours as a mechanism of generating revenue or allocating budgets, that's the wrong thing. Because the first thing is in this new world we're operating in, hours and posterior sitting in a room like this or a room like I don't know if you can even see that, a common lecture hall isn't the way it's going to work anymore. Andrew Ng, when he taught his first course online, which became Coursera, told his students, you can come or you don't have to come. He had about 20% of his students show up for the class. He said, we're getting everything online. There's no reason to come to class. And he agreed, by the way. And that's going to impact our infrastructure. And it's also going to impact our faculty. Here's our faculty. And so what happens if about 10% of those people are gone tomorrow? Let's say by attrition, not by reduction in force. Is there something that's not going to happen as a result of those 10% fewer faculty? The common outcry will be, well, we can't offer as many sections or as many options in these courses. Fewer students are going to be served, blah, blah. If we get out of the lecture world and get into a world where the content is at least available to the students and faculty can design better interventions than they have been historically able to do in the past, maybe I will win with 10% fewer faculty. As in my business as a software engineer, I go examine companies and they say, oh, well, we have 300 people working on this project. We got all these problems. I said, the first thing you want to do is fire half the people. Reduce it to 150 and then we can maybe get this thing under control. Nothing against the people. It's just it's too out of control communications problem. Another mechanism to reduce costs, of course, is to get rid of the infrastructure. Well, maybe we don't want to get rid of it. Maybe we want to redesign it. As an example, this year we have a visiting professor who is looking at the impact on the infrastructure, the buildings and the spaces and the interactions between the faculty and the students on the physical plant of universities and how it's impacted by the digital changes that are occurring in the educational world. That's going to be an important thing in the future. Who was it? Mike, I think, mentioned in his talk about where do I find the right space for these small sessions of groups of people rather than large lecture halls. Here's an example of cost reduction as a result of, I'll just call it digital content, appropriately done. If I think about developing a course, once it's developed, and let's say it's taught every semester, it's a fixed cost for a very long period of time until we get rid of the course. And it's the faculty cost of producing and delivering the lectures. An online content model, for example, what Karen mentioned, how many people they had involved in the development of her course. Once I've spent that initial cost of developing the course, the repetition costs go way down, okay? Because I'm not spending all my time in a lecture hall. Now you can say, well, if we want to flip classrooms, take advantage of some flip classrooms, that's not going to save us any money. Well, that's happening here at Georgia Tech today. We're not saving money, but we're significantly improving the quality of education for our students at the same cost. To me, that's a win. You have to decide what to do about it. Another revenue source that conceivably could help you, or cost reduction if you want to say it, is licensing of the intellectual property that you are producing in this world. Several of our courses are under consideration to be licensed by other universities to use in their classes. Several of our courses are being considered to be used as dual enrollment courses between high school and Georgia Tech. All kinds of options exist there. That's a different model of business than we're used to. We're not counting seats, people's rear ends sitting in seats for 15 weeks a semester and 3 hours a week. What we're doing is, in fact, trying to figure out how to create a new business model that we haven't thought about in the past. The last thing I want to mention in this is, in a possibility of revenue generation, is the opportunity exists for all of you out there to be able to create new solutions to problems that haven't existed. For example, how do we figure out how to take a chemistry lab and put it online and be as effective as a hands-on chemistry lab? As far as I know, that hasn't been done yet. There's lots of problems. How do I pour liquids in a virtual environment, stuff like that? But if, that's Beacon, Beaker and Bunsen, you know those guys. They're in the chemistry lab trying to figure this out. There's another opportunity for us that maybe we're not considering. Another example is Mike's virtual laboratories he's doing in physics. A whole new world is opening up in this environment that we haven't taken advantage of, which probably and very likely will produce revenues that we've never thought about in the past. So the bottom line is forget about what we've done. Look at this in a whole new way. Think about how Google looked at revenue generation, not copy them, but think about how they did it in a way which nobody else thought of before. And they're making huge amounts of money. Think about Amazon. What did they do? They put a store online. They have never made a penny. So we can't take a university and put it online and operate the same way and think we're going to make money. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melanie, and I'm Dean of USG eCore. There are 4 students in every 10 where we can make a difference in terms of whether or not they're successful in the traditional small-scale online classroom. And this is where our student support efforts must be focused. With only about 60% of Georgia high school graduates going on to start college, there are some issues with access indeed, but the much larger problem is still retention. And we still have only about half of our entering freshmen completing college in 6 years in Georgia. So this is still our most critical issue. Not only will progression and graduation affect our funding more and more, but the bigger picture is quality of life. More educated Georgians means a better citizen population and a better economy for all of us. Now, we've come a long way with online student success in the last 6 years, and I'm going to share about 13 things that we do that can have a big effect. Research and experience shows us that we can bring online student success up and even above that of traditional face-to-face classes. Now, as we move towards these new models we've been discussing, we'll have to consider how these best practices may or may not translate. So as we go through these, think about how the challenges they might provide with some of the models that we've been discussing. So one of the very first things we do in the traditional online class is a gated registration. Before students can even enroll, they take an orientation that lets them know what to expect, where they get their books, that they're not going to see their instructor, all about proctored exams, and this is a very powerful piece of it. We also have to get rid of the stuff. We often see online courses that have way too much busy work and junk that overwhelms students. An advantage I've seen with the 5 MOOCs that I've taken but never finished is that they tend to have a lot less clutter. Next, we want to identify and reach out to students like those who've missed assignments or are falling behind. Sometimes in eCore, we call 1,000 students in a single day. We've also used data to identify who is at risk and call them preemptively at the beginning of the semester. An important piece of this, though, is that faculty really should be the first ones to reach out to students when problems arise. Clearly, this would pose a big problem for large-scale online classes with thousands of students, particularly if revenues were limited. We also ask professors to give out their own cell phone numbers to students, and most of them find that students never ever call, maybe just one per term. In fact, we've heard it said before that behind snakes and dentists, our experience is that professors are the most feared things on earth. We also want to demonstrate caring. We have to take the approach that we're teaching students, not teaching a subject. So building a personal connection is much harder to achieve in a place where you can't see one another, where people feel isolated. Once again, the MOOC model is providing a challenge for this. Check course emails 3 times a day. That's right, 3 times. Usually we hear 24 to 48 hours, right? But checking emails 3 times a day is really a piece of cake. In fact, a lot of you are doing it right now. So grade all assignments within 48 hours. MOOCs tend to rely heavily on automated quizzes, so this may actually be less of a problem in MOOCs or with some types of prior learning assessments. Of course, it makes it more appropriate for courses with objective answers like math. We also provide individualized, specific feedback on every written assignment, and we use the sandwich approach to give criticism in the middle, kind of sandwich between 2 or 3 positive comments. This is often where the real learning actually occurs, and it's very difficult for us to scale to large-scale classes. We also want to be compassionate towards student needs. This has a lot to do with simply being kind and not so rigid, and we'll look at that more in 28 seconds. It's easy to be a great teacher when you're teaching easy students. It's the high-maintenance ones and how we react to them that very well define us. Call every student by name, not just in email responses, but also when responding on the discussion board and when grading assignments. This does a whole lot to personalize the conversation and makes people feel recognized and more likely to succeed. We need to be flexible. If someone is late on an assignment, consider an alternative assignment. But we think we've got to teach them these life lessons about these horrible things that happen to you when you're late. Where in your learning outcomes does it say that you've got to teach them life lessons? So why don't we try to focus on our learning outcomes? Remember, you can make a big difference with a little effort. As a grad student back in the mid-90s, I got a big surprise phone call one night from the program director who pushed me to take more classes, graduate sooner. He became my mentor. I went to work for his colleague. That led to this job and me standing here today. So the point of many of these is it highlights the critical importance of the faculty-student relationship and its tremendous impact on student success. The problem is that faculty-student relationships do not scale very well. So looking ahead, it seems that the students who will shine in some of our new models will be the very ones that we're going to do well anyway. So we have to consider how we're going to meet the needs of the others. If you'd like to follow up with me, my email is melaniec@westcott.edu, and I'll respond to you within 48 hours. Thank you.
Now, we've heard the terms accessibility once or twice so far today, and I know from long experience that sometimes that creates fear in everybody. In all the new models and all the MOOCs that we're talking about, my purpose here today is to ignite your interest in universal design for learning, maybe placate a little bit about that fear, but also give you some concrete ideas that you can follow up on. And if I had an hour, I could give you 20 times that many, but I don't, so I'll have to talk fast. My name is Robert Todd. I'm the USG Director of Policy and Partnership Development, but I also wear another hat as a Senior Research Scientist at Georgia Tech, where I've done research for a very long time on universal design for learning and the needs of students with disabilities in online environments. So, with no further ado, first of all, universal design. Let's start there. Some of you may know what this is and how this could apply to the new models that you're looking at, perhaps doing yourselves or assisting with. Universal design refers to broad spectrum ideas meant to produce either buildings, products, environments, anything that is inherently accessible to people with disabilities, folks who have different needs, different learning styles. The term universal design was coined by an architect named Ronald Mace, whom I had the pleasure to know. And his idea was to create both a built and online, computer-generated, whatever environment you can think of for use by every person on the planet. So universal design for learning is the natural outgrowth of that, and that's what I want to talk about today, because that's what we're interested in, is teaching and learning. This is a principle or a set of principles for curriculum development that give every individual a fair chance to learn. The UDL, Universal Design for Learning, provides a blueprint for creating instructional goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everybody, not just for the so-called average student or the so-called star student. They aren't one-size-fits-all solutions, but flexible approaches. If you want to know more about this, CAST, www.cast.org, that's where you can find out some more details. I'm going to give you a little idea what this means, though, and I do have, one or two pretty pictures. It's not all just text. So first of all, in terms of UDL principles, we are looking at brain networks. How do people think differently? How do they access information and respond to information differently? There are recognition networks. That's the what of learning. That's how we gather facts, how we categorize what we see and what we hear, how we basically process. The how of learning in strategic networks. Planning and performing tasks. Again, it deals with organization and expression of ideas. Say, writing essays, solving math problems. This is the how of learning, how learning takes place for each individual. The why of learning is the affective networks. If you don't have a desire or there isn't some why to learn, you're not going to learn. Look at all the people who take MOOCs, or at least start them, and how many of them actually finish. We've heard a little bit about that today. So this is about getting students engaged and staying motivated, and how you can challenge, excite, and interest these students, the affective dimension. So the universal design for brain networks, putting it together, you, one, present information and content in different ways for different students. Many of you are familiar with this concept already. It's no different in a MOOC or a new model. Just think outside the box, whether it's inside a room like this or beyond. More ways to provide multiple means of presentation, if you want to write that down as a keynote. Next checkbox, differentiate the ways that students can express what they know. How do they show this with action? How do they show with expression what they know? How do they prove to you and to others what they know? How do they use it? And then the next checkbox, stimulate interest and motivation for learning. Again, you lost the students if they don't have motivation, if they don't have interest. So the next one of the principles is multiple means of engagement for that student. The principles, again, in a little more detail, provide multiple means of presentation. That what? Learners learn in different ways. We all know that. Some of us are more audio, some visual, whatever. Here's an example right here, color, contrast. Some users, in terms of their base abilities, can't use information that does not have proper appearance. Principle 2, provide multiple means of action and engagement. Again, that's the how, learning the different ways that students can engage back with the learning material and with the classroom. In this case, I have given a refreshable braille device as an example, because some students maybe aren't going to be able to use this computer the way we do. And then principle 3, to give you a little more information on engagement, make it exciting, making it interesting. I have these Sony goggles here that I think a lot of students react to positively because they give them multiple means of working with visual input. So I'm not going to go through all these slides, but I'm putting them here so that you have them for reference. Multiple means of presentation. Work on display. It could be for any student. It could be for students with disabilities. Take them all into account. Don't just think of yourself or perhaps your model student. Multiple means of action. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but provide alternatives for response. Provide alternatives for actually allowing students to get back with you and to work with the material. And engagement, again, what are the things that cause students to be engaged? Is it something that's multimedia? Is it like a video game? Or is it maybe something that just requires a level of challenge that is appropriate to the student? In terms of web, LMSs, learning management systems, MOOCs, all of these things, all these principles apply the same way, the UDL principles, nothing different there. If you want more information on them, on the slides that you'll have access to, I'm giving you some tools that you or your staff can work with. And if you're interested in how this applies to disability-related issues for students, we talked about access. Here are a couple of tools that can help you out, guidelines and standards. And I've given you not only the standards and guidelines, but some good checklists you can use to make them understandable, and some ways you can actually get your staff to help you verify that you've done the right thing and that whatever it is you're producing is perceivable, usable, and engageable by all students. So all of this information on the slides for you to go further. I wish I had another hour. I don't. I hope that this has given you an idea of the different ways that students can engage with material and that you take this all into account, including such libraries as EDUCAUSE, and you go out there and you do it, and all students get to profit. Thank you.
I'd like to go back to the concept of butts in seats. As the last speaker, I can say our butts are probably about ready to get out of our seats. And so what I want to do for you is to present a series of images that in some ways summarize much of what we've been talking about and point to one particular theme about change in faculty roles. And then I would recommend you come to my breakout session on faculty roles for a much greater, more in-depth exploration of this topic. Mike Rogers asked me to speak about this subject not because I am an expert practitioner as a faculty member, but because I am a long-time practitioner as a faculty member and thus have seen faculty roles change quite a bit from when I first started teaching. Here I am in my first job, fresh out of graduate school. This is an image of a 12th century ivory of a monk in his scriptorium, and in many ways, which of course is the time of the beginning of the universities in Europe. And in some ways is a kind of icon of what we think about as the old role, the solo practitioner, the solo monk, working carefully in a quiet setting, a quiet, still setting on a text. So quiet, in fact, that a bird can sit on your shoulder and dictate to you what it is you need to write. That's, of course, the Holy Spirit, of course. The modern version is a little different. You know, the changes have have multiplied dramatically the number of roles that we have, and that's the first thing that we have to take into consideration. And we have this image from Bruce Rosenblum's article on the disaggregated professor as having so many new roles and so many tasks and so many new expertise areas that he feels the need to cover, that he's burdened. And so if the image is clear enough to you, that disaggregated professor is really much more the aggravated professor than anything else. It's certainly not a very happy view. And this word cloud, as all the ones we've seen today, really just point to this complicated and noisy sea within which faculty members have to navigate. This is an article, a figure rather, from an article about University of Washington's study on tools that both faculty felt the need for, students need, over since 2008, from 2008 to 2011. And they just grow and grow and grow. Very few go down in use. And there are many of them, of course, we wouldn't have thought about 10 years ago, for sure. And more have been presented today. So the number of tools and the need expertise that we need a tool to keep up with our tools, and probably eventually another level to keep up with the tool keepers. This image from Paul Atkinson's article on student spaces is an interesting connection that we don't have but just a moment to talk about, which is that not only has this disaggregated or unbundled role of the faculty member affected the relationship with the student and obviously affected relationships with faculty and with the university, but is having a profound effect or will have a profound effect on spaces. The student spaces, the learning spaces are changing dramatically, and we hear this from architects who come consult us about our emerging needs for labs and communal space and faculty offices and so forth. So it's a multiplier effect. This is, we've talked about Andy mentioned the green world or the green screen that we use both for students and faculty to create videos as a part of our new online courses. And what's interesting to me about this image is it points to the theme that I'm trying to suggest to you, is that these roles that the new faculty member have to grapple with are too many. And in many ways, of course, what has to happen is a team approach. What has to happen is an infrastructure that helps with this. Few people could operate that green screen by his or herself. So you have a team. Now the image is also interesting to me because it points to one of the most ominous fears, I think, that faculty have about this brave and green new world, which is that what's missing from that image, of course, is the faculty member. You know, and that's the major concern. On the other hand, however, you can read it as a stage setting with anticipation, waiting for the star to appear. This team approach, then, as we rapidly move to the conclusion, this is what has to be invoked. This, to me, is the change without question. The faculty member cannot do all this on his or her own, or will just result in dysfunction and frustration and breakdown. So it has to be a member of the team. And this team approach, this disaggregated, what we might even call rhizomatic approach, fits the new paradigms of learning as well. Because so the new roles of the faculty, I think, are going to integrate with new roles of what we understand in cognitive science about how we learn and about how knowledge is procured. And thus, the happier faculty member is no longer the solo songwriter, singer-songwriter in the coffee shop by himself with a badly tuned guitar, but rather the orchestra leader, the conductor, here the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra at Chastain Park, having a wonderful time. And so invoking that, we move from the overburdened, disaggregated professor, we hope, to the team of online faculty members, here in an image from West Georgia's landing page on the online classes, that are happy, coordinated, learned, youthful, and good-looking, all at the same time. Thank you very much.